Hello, my name is Julian Murfitt. I'm co-founder of Mekon and now a member of the executive team at Contium. Welcome to day 3 keynote at the Adobe DITAWORLD for 2023. So first thing I should perhaps do is explain where Contium and Mekon fit together. Many of you will recognize me as the face of Mekon, and we joined forces with Orbis Technology at the beginning of the year, and now we're rebranding to Contium to represent our global services in content management, content operations around the world. And we have offices in North America, Australia, India, and the UK. And our head office is in the lovely Annapolis in Maryland. So our outsourced managed services represent quite an important part of customer engagement. And we have our own technology, much of which is leveraging some of the Adobe technology. And we provide professional services and have done for many years to help implement technology and create solutions. And AM Guides is by far the leading technology for us going in the last few years and moving forward. But where do we start? Well, actually the late 80s for me and the dawn of a new decade. And desktop publishing was certainly featuring heavily in my life, working with PageMaker and seeing how the new desktop applications were changing actually a lot of companies' experience. PCs and the Mac were in the office, and that definitely created a disruptive technology, allowing companies to bring in the capability for doing page layout, much probably to the disgust of the professional designers that spend their lives doing the page maker. And I'm showing here a little bit of the graph of uptake. Certainly this was fairly early technology. And around the same time, there were blue chip companies like IBM, GE and Boeing, who were doing some real pioneering work around structured content and markup languages. And this was certainly only possible for those really with deep pockets. And as we moved on through into the 90s, and we started the company, my brother and I don't look a day older, I know you're going to say, and CD-ROM was starting to come out, and desktop publishing was certainly establishing itself as a powerful tool. And I was first introduced to FrameMaker and given some training by Max Hoffman, and I loved it. I thought it was a real game-changing technology. And it was the early stages of Frame Builder and FrameMaker and SGML that I believe actually now, when I look back, actually bridged the gap between this concept of page layout and desktop publishing and what we see now with true pagination driven by actually the structure of the content rather than the page and how it looks. And some of our early customers, people like Nortel, who had invested heavily in Frame Builder and were looking at how structure could help them. And this was a already established customer by the time we came on the scene, and we were providing training. So we were helping to deploy the capability. And then actually a big jump for us was an engagement with post office counters. That's where you buy your stamps or pick up your pension in the old days. And the technology that they found interesting was being able to bring in the desktop publishing so they can actually format and produce their standard operating procedures. And this actually gave us the opportunity to employ more people and provide a complete service. We're outsourcing the template design and actually the conversion. And I have to say the conversion then was cut and paste. We literally had a team cutting and pasting content from an old WordPerfect environment into FrameMaker. But come 95, and some of us were probably in sorrow over Robbie Williams leaving Take That. And actually Adobe came into my life for the first time properly when they acquired the frame technology and frame builder and frame maker. So we then became actually an Adobe partner and therefore a reseller of this technology. And our competition, interestingly, at that time were more of the box shifting type companies. And their interest was not the why and the how, but the how many do you want to buy? And that really wasn't going to light my fire. We were already seeing at that early stage that it was more interesting if we were engaging with the customer and understanding what it was that they wanted to actually achieve by implementing this technology. So as we moved through into the early 2000s, we were starting to see more and more complex solutions. And actually, we'd seen an interest in this standard called S1000D, which was in the aerospace sector. And we started investing heavily in that. And S1000D, we found that with FrameMaker, we could build a really good first-class extension to it to allow customers to write and manage their content in accordance with the standard. And so we're working with people like RAF Handling Squadron and including things like AP70, which was their RAF standard. And S1000D really started to take off, pardon the expression. Of course, it was used heavily in things like military jets, and is as it is today. Meanwhile, IBM have now launched DITA, and this is a bit early days for us, and we haven't certainly got involved in it straight away. And most of our customers at this stage are still actually seeking customized solutions, and actually quite often quite complicated. So clients like Hansard, PC, Parliamentary Council, you see the logo on the screen, Edexcel, AQA. These are all clients that need to change and modify their publishing processes. And in order to do that, we were having to do deep analysis of their content architecture and developing custom DTDs, which inevitably means custom editing environments, custom templates in Frame, and also publishing output customization. So a lot of investment, high risk for both the supplier and the customer, and they take time to implement. We're also seeing quite an interesting uptake on things like database publishing. So this is really where some content, some information is already held in a structured environment. Something like even a spreadsheet, but this could be in a database. And they may well have other data that's perhaps in Word. In the case of Threadneedle, they would have fund managers that would write snippets of information in Word. And that need to be pulled into something that could be typeset and published. And still, like those early days of outsourced typesetting, it was time consuming and costing a lot. But bringing it in-house and just using traditional desktop publishing processes would be far too slow. And it was taking about 2 weeks to produce a report. And what we were able to do by using the power of FrameMaker and database publishing plugins that we developed, we were able to reduce that down to less than 5 days. So this was quite game-changing. And things like OnCourse was another project we worked on where the customer had many courses, like training courses, that were stored in a database, and we could stream this in through various frame development plugins using the APIs. So this was I would say, not always required, and certainly not a common area, because not everybody had information in data. So that's maybe we have started to look at other things, and that's the time when we started to realize that DITA maybe could be a more broad, capable standard. In fact, I found this press release, which was from 2005, when Mark Poston, one of our team, was still with us. it was starting to experiment with Ditto and realized that by extending some of the power of FrameMaker, we could really make the Open Toolkit publish straight into Frame and save a lot of the effort, if you like. And in fact, I can take the quote at the bottom. He said, using our knowledge of single source publishing technology and standards such as Ditto, we've helped to ensure technical publications departments can utilize a familiar and powerful application, which was FrameMaker, using Ditto for their publishing projects. And so we're now starting to see a change. We're investing in technology ourselves. We're using technology that's out there to help customers. And we're starting to see Ditto as being actually quite a strong standard that we can leverage, or help customers leverage, more importantly. And about that time, we started to develop a model of engagement. So we're now no longer really selling software per se, and actually more working as a consultant with the customer to help them implement technology. And to do this, we needed to really identify the need for change. So we started developing our process, which you see here, the access, assessing their needs, which we did with the content strategy audit, and then coming up with some design. And then later prototyping, and then an iterative rollout. And their focus really was on how much can we save? Maybe we can reduce the time to market. And it has to be said that translation was a big factor here. Quite typically, we were seeing savings of around 40% for implementing a structured publishing process using Ditto, and then being able to send it to translators, where reuse and consistency was reducing the amount of cost and time in translation. Automatic translation was early days, and certainly even now, although that's starting to take off, the translation costs were quite extensive, and possibly globalization was feeding this need for it. And actually, in 2007, I did a keynote for Ditto Europe. And I brought this slide. This is a couple of snapshots of some of the slides I gave.
And I was intrigued while I was doing the research to see what we were saying and what was the analysis. And these graphs just show some of the uptake of Ditto and how they were using it. And I was quite intrigued. In the left-hand side, you can see the green column where some people were implementing Ditto with no CMS. That's certainly not the case today, but I don't have much of the data. And this is now a call for action, actually. I'm going to say people like Scriptorial and Precision Content, we should work together, working with you customers to get more data on what our company is doing and how they're implementing things like Ditto. And the reason for that is because customers need evidence, they need information to give them support that this is the right way to go. And I think working with Adobe and our other colleagues in the consulting industry and you customers, we can actually pull together better analysis and data that we can share and give people more confidence. And that's going to help us to move forward. But meanwhile, coming back to the journey, by this 2010, we're seeing that the technical community, or the technical committee actually for Ditto, they're starting to launch the maturity model. And Amber Swope produced this as an example, which a lot of people have used, and various incarnations of it. And it shows how implementation of Ditto grows as you make more investment, you'll see more return. But that investment represents a deeper understanding and requires a deeper understanding of Ditto and semantics and metadata. And I have to say that in the early days, a majority of the customers that we were working with were actually simply just replacing their PDF process with something a little bit more automated and looking for ROI improvements around translation from reuse. And that saving was enough for them to make the decision. But they weren't seeing the benefit of delivering dynamic content and information that we were perhaps exploring with things like Congility. And I think Congility and the content server was a little bit ahead of its time. And it's only now that we're now seeing more investment in the content that makes that more of a viable option. But in 2016, there was another game changer. David Bowie sadly was lost, and the artist formerly known as Prince. And yet Adobe introduced AM Guides, the product formerly known as XML documentation add-on for Adobe Experience Manager. And AM Guides was a big change. Instead of just the multi-channel publishing, we're going to see a big change. We have now got customers in high-tech, manufacturing and finance who are realizing that DITA is a good platform. And Adobe have introduced the ability to combine first-class DITA support with website content management in a global client. And this coming together is really where we can see the potential for omni-channel publishing and thinking about the end customer. And it's the end customer that actually has the drive here. Whereas previously we were seeing investment in this technology to help perhaps save money, save some of the process, the time to market, but really producing the same content, the same output that you were producing years before. Now we're going to start seeing a big improvement. And this map shows how the DITA uptake has grown. Again, we had this slow investment over the first few years, and I truly believe that AM Guides is going to allow us to fill that big red spot in the middle and start giving chance to customers to really explode. And I've got to say, XML is not dead, therefore, despite what Jason says. Maybe that's another talk for another day again. JSON, of course, is a good output, and we use JSON as a deliverable format, but it's not where you would write the content. If you're going to store, create, manage your content with a semantic level of richness, you need to do that in the DITA CMS using AM Guides. And then we can produce the output in other formats. And now we've got AM Guides, we've got first-class editing in a web browser, and the user experience of that is definitely something that a lot of our customers are coming back and saying, yes, this is what we've been needing. We've also got built-in PDF publishing. And then things like IDXML, which is our plugin that allows you to publish to InDesign, still means that we can get that first-class desktop publishing capability, but bring it into our structured environment. And of course, that story of DTP did change from the PageMaker into, and when InDesign came out, it's really dominated the space. And I will say as well, the cloud version of AM Guides is a masterpiece and gives us true capability to scale up. So a little bit about Word though, because we've got built-in Word conversion in AM, and there are extensions and other options that we can look at. So I'd like to little touch on that. So Word is an unstructured format. Although it does have XML underneath, it doesn't really have the semantics that we're interested in. And it's the semantics we need to add if we're going to add it to DITA and give it some structure. So I'm thinking it's a bit like colorizing black and white pictures. And when you colorize a black and white picture, you have to work out what the colors are going to be. The black and white image, as you will see here on Marilyn, doesn't really give us much indication of what her dress color is. It could easily be green as well as black. And the blue dress that we're seeing from Dorothy, how do we know it was a blue checker? And her red shoes, well, for sure, we know from the writing that it was red, but you can't tell from any black and white image. And this is much like we see with word conversion. You're converting something that has no level of metadata or meaning, and we have to infer that by styles. And unfortunately, the use of styles are pretty poor in Word, which means that the chances of you being able to extract that content with some meaning is actually quite hard. Okay, we have some tools like XML tricks that improve this, but I'm going to see some changes over the next few years, I think, that will actually really improve this. And maybe this is where AI is going to give us some help. But first, we're going to need to deal with another issue, and that is taxonomy. Because meaning is only really brought when we have full understanding of the taxonomy. And Darwin made good use of taxonomy 160 years ago, but it's taken some 20 years for the concept of taxonomy to be brought into the Darwin information architecture. So now DITA is going to be able to benefit from that. And I can see that this is things like Semantic Booster, which we introduced to pull in taxonomy into AEM, so that the AEM system can benefit from a corporate governed central taxonomy system. But then the next step is adding that knowledge graph. And if we're using tools like Pool Party, then we can add a knowledge graph to our taxonomy and then combine that with DITA, and then we'll start really seeing some power. So it's about metadata. As Barack Obama once said in one of his presentations, I think back in 2014, and he said that it's about the aboutness. And so we need the aboutness of content, and it's that that's going to give us the next step and the future, I believe. And yet we're talking about ChatGPT at this conference, and there's a number of people that are more knowledgeable than I. And I believe this big worry is the trust. We're going to be getting new information that's automatically generated, and I think it's going to lack trust. And what I'm seeing is these specialists in the knowledge management and the taxonomy are going to bring that combined with this massive search around the web, and then we'll start getting extra information about the answers. And that, I think, is where we're going to get the saving and the value and the benefit. So active metadata, as Gartner talks about, and linking DITA with the knowledge graph, then yes, I think we'll have power. And I'm thinking if we could do the same thing with conversion and have our source word content matching up with the taxonomy and the knowledge graph, then some of the algorithms can actually really start to add some value to this. So this is where the future, I believe, lies. And I was playing around with ChatGPT, as we all do at the moment, and had a little game with Turkey, and I wanted to see what it would do. So I'm asking the question of what should USA do with Turkey? And of course, I was being slightly mean, but of course it's come up with the country and saying how they might want to deal with Christmas and the relationship with the United States. And yet, actually, I was thinking about more of the dinner and what would we have for our roast turkey. So this is the future, I believe, of adding that metadata that will give it more meaning. So for us at Contium, customers are now wanting more value. They're looking for value in their content, and they're therefore looking for us to provide value in implementing things like DITA. POCs, proof of concepts, are commonplace. We can spin up a proof of concept using AEM guides very quickly. And that allows us to not just test that it's possible, but see how the user experience will be for the users and the writers of content, and then also test some of the output to see what the user experience will be for the end customer, and showing how that can connect up with AEM sites and other JSON outputs and other methods. And we're also seeing still clients are wanting to outsource managed services. So I'm sure we will still see that. And our content operations managed service team have many authors around the world, in fact. And that complements those clients that want to invest in the technology themselves, but also need some extra help. So I think we're going to see, from our point of view, both managed services, technology, and this professional services to help you implement. So let me just move to something slightly different. And I wanted to share with you an experience that I had as a customer recently. And it started with me wanting to buy some shelving from a company called Tilco. So let me just see if I can put this on live, and so it should give you a bit of a feel for the experience. And the reason I've brought this is because I think it really encapsulated what I'm going to expect as a customer in the future. So here's my shelving unit that I was designing. And of course, it's a nice interactive interface, as I think more sites are giving you. And so we can change the size, the density, the width of the shelves, the height. I can make it a slightly smaller shelf unit. And it's giving me the option to see it with books and what have you, but I can also turn those off. So hide the item. So yes, it's quite a nice interface. But the clincher for me is, what do you do when you buy it? Well, for me, as we bought the product, they delivered it on a whole bunch of boxes. It was a flat pack product, but with a difference. My wife got her own personal manual that showed exactly how to build it. And it needed it because this is a complex piece of kit. And you can see from the top right hand corner of the screen here, we've got V21, 22, 23, 24. So there was a lot of parts. Each part was labelled and numbered, and they all went in a specific place for my design of shelf. And it's the first time I personally experienced a personalised manual with our name on it. And even the code at the bottom, we've got this QR code, which is personalised to us, so we can share it with our friends so they can get a discount if they want to buy something similar. And so this whole thing was delivered in PDF and on print. I have to say I wanted the print one because I'm on my knees putting this together, and actually the PDF one was probably not so necessary, and they sent to me by email when I was researching information about how they do this. And it's all done as an automated process, and they're producing thousands of these, so it's really slick. So how does that relate to us? Well, we're working with a client at the moment that make machines that make chips, and those machines are about 5 million, not £5,000. And so I'm not going to experience the manual. But what they're wanting and what we're helping them with is how to, using a sales configurator, pull in the right components that make up these complex systems with multiple gases and different pieces that make up the jigsaw of the chip manufacturing machine, so that it can then produce the right imagery and graphics and then drive certain content from the DITA content. So we're doing some proof of concept with them at the moment. And I think this is really a good illustration of how that might change. So this is just a little taster of what I think is happening. There's been a long journey. It's in many ways things have changed a lot, and in many ways actually things have not changed. Our customers are still needing value. They're still needing help. And now we can take advantage of maybe some of the real mature DITA capability. So if you need some help with your AIM implementation, do reach out to me. Otherwise, I really hope you enjoy the rest of the event and see some of the other great technology that Adobe are producing. And I'll continue to work with my customers and Adobe to do this for the next few years. Thank you very much for your time.